Before we dive into why I am doing this video, I want to preface that this video is about depression and related topics. So if it's not something that you can stomach, or if you fear it may bring back some memories, please feel free to skip this video. But I wanted to address the fact that depression is known as a silent killer. And the reason that is because a lot of people who suffer with depression learn how to mask their emotions very quickly. They stuff it inside, and then they put on a smile and they laugh as if everything is normal. And as someone who struggles with clinical depression myself, I understand how dark someone's thoughts can get when they're struggling with depression. So to kind of give some of my story, back in junior high, things began to overwhelm me without me really realizing it. I, at that point, was already struggling with severe anxiety. And so adding on to overstimulating or overwhelming situations to that, as well as the pressure of being the perfect daughter and perfect student, my depression eventually formed. To provide an example to kind of help others who don't have depression understand how it feels. When my depression first formed, it was like a small black hole had formed in the center of my chest. And over time, with the added negative situations and events and even in my own thoughts, that black hole slowly began to grow and consume me. It's very painful, and it can rob somebody of their happiness. Like I said, over time, my black hole grew with every negative thing that I experienced, and a lot of the things that happened around me, I ended up blaming myself for. And one of the struggles with those who have clinical depression and who get to this point where they have that black hole robbing them of their joy is logic kind of goes out the window. So when I say I was blaming myself for the negative situations, it was more like if the people around me that I was hanging out with were unhappy, it was because I didn't do enough to make their day better. If my parents were arguing about their financial situation, it was because I was another mouth they had to feed, and they would be better off without me. So even though it wasn't logical, my own thoughts had turned against me at that point and was just feeding that black hole and making it bigger. When freshman year hit, the black hole had grown to about half the size of my abdomen. And unfortunately, during that year, I gained 3 bullies. They didn't know of each other, and they would attack me in separate locations. But the things that they said kind of confirmed for me what I was already believing about myself, that I was worthless, that I wouldn't amount to anything, and that I was a burden to everybody around me. I survived my freshman year telling myself that once it ended, things would be okay. And even though I was able to escape my bullies, the black hole was still there. And it had grown bigger to the point where not only was it consuming my whole abdomen, but part of my arms and my neck, to the point where the pain was kind of suffocating. And I eventually got to the point where I was no longer truly happy. My laughter was not genuine. The smiles that I gave were not real. Again, they were masks, because I didn't want the pain that I was feeling to go on to somebody else. I didn't want somebody to struggle with what I was struggling with. So I was trying my best in my own weird logic to protect others from the things I was dealing with by not sharing what I was dealing with. But I was still struggling with a severe amount of pain inside, and it got to the point where I just wanted the pain to stop. And the only way I knew to get away from the pain and to make it stop was to no longer live. So around this time, I began to ask myself, is there anything that I needed to live for? And unfortunately, after a few days of thinking about that, I came to the conclusion that there wasn't, at least not something that I was willing to suffer this pain for anymore. So I began to think about how I was going to do it and when. Now, I want to step aside and clarify that my parents loved me. I, on the basic level, had everything I needed. We might not have had much, but we had each other, and we had a roof over our heads, we had food, we had all those things. But again, when you're in such a deep and dark place internally, it's very hard to think logically and to truly feel that you are loved. So when I was going through this, yes, my parents were telling me that they loved me, but from my perspective, I had told myself that they were saying those things out of obligation, not that they actually loved me. So again, at that point, I started thinking about how I was going to do it and when, and then the opportunity arose to do it. And I took my item of choice and I readied myself to pass away. I was 15. The reason I'm sharing this story is because this season, for some, can be the most wonderful time of the year, but at the same time, it can be for others, it can be the most painful and the most lonely. And when you're dealing with severe loneliness and struggling to feel like anybody truly cares or that anybody truly loves you, you begin to spiral into those negative thoughts and unfortunately dive deeper into the darkness that is your depression, which leads to more temptation to escape that pain. Unfortunately, since December has started, I have heard of 3 relatively close people who have passed away due to their own depression. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I have heard of 3 situations of people contemplating of doing this, and one of them was able to communicate with somebody before they acted upon it. So I haven't had an update, but I'm really hoping that they're getting the help they need. Unfortunately, the other 2, one of them was my coworker, who I found out about yesterday, and the 3rd I found out when I woke up today, who was a mother of 3 teenage boys. It's a sharp reminder of how much how much we need to check on our loved ones and show them, not just with words, how much we care for them. I share my story in hopes that it helps another person give it one more day. Because this darkness, this dark moment that you're going through right now, it will pass. It's not going to stay there forever. And I know in that moment it feels like it will never end. I know in that moment you're so consumed with pain and doubt that you don't think that you will get past this, but you will. Tomorrow is always a new day, and it brings forth more joy than the present day can bring. So I encourage you who is struggling with these things to try not to dwell upon the negativity in your mind. Instead, find something that makes you happy and that brings you a little bit of joy. It doesn't matter how small it is, because no matter how small it is, if it brings you happiness, then it is a good thing, because the small things can build up to something bigger. So whether that looks like a squishy toy that helps your anxiety calm down, or your favorite TV show or your favorite song, in that moment, instead of focusing on the negativity, focus on those things. And when you finally are at a point where you have the strength to reach out to somebody, do so. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of bravery to reach out to somebody and to be vulnerable in that, because you're so used to bottling everything up that it can in itself be painful to talk about those things. But the pain that comes with being vulnerable in that sense is more like rubbing alcohol in an infected wound. It'll sting, it'll hurt, but it'll help. Whereas the pain that you're feeling with your depression, with your own black hole, it's more of an infectious pain, a toxic pain that needs to be eradicated. I also share my story to encourage you all, again, to reach out during the season and check on your loved ones. Everybody wants to feel seen. They want to be heard. So I encourage you all, and I ask that during this season, I know we all have a lot going on, especially with Christmas right around the corner, and we're trying to get last minute gifts, but I ask that you take some time to just sit down and allow the people that you love to talk about what they might have going on, to listen to them, not to react and to respond, but to show that you care, so that they can feel heard and so that they feel comfortable opening up to you. I also suggest that you ask your loved ones what their love language is, because sometimes those who are dealing with this sort of thing, they have a love language that isn't being met, and if you can find a way to meet that, then maybe they may no longer feel unloved, and grateful to God for all that He has done for me, and most of all, for keeping me from harming myself all those years ago. The beautiful thing about God's grace is that despite the fact that I had no idea who He was, He still cared for me in that moment. I didn't accept Christ until I was 24. At 27, I finally told my parents that I had been depressed and the things that I was thinking about when I was 15. And they hadn't known that I had went through that. At 28, I started taking antidepressants, which did help with my mentality, because depression can also be a chemical imbalance of the brain. And what some people may not realize is that when you have that chemical imbalance, there is a brain fog that can cloud your judgment and your thinking, and it makes it even more difficult to go throughout your daily life. When I started on my antidepressants, I finally was able to think clearly, and I was able to begin to grow because of that. So at age 29, I began to work hard on my counseling and recovering from the internal wounds that I had, which has helped me gain more confidence in myself and allowed me to chase after the things that I wanted out of my life, and actually have the desire to live. Not that Christ didn't do that Himself. Christ gave me a new life and joy, even in the valleys that I walked through. But because of that clarity of mind, I was able to grow close to God and eventually ask Him, "What do you want in my life?" Which led to me also at 29 to start going after my bachelor's degree. And during that year, I obtained my second associate's degree so that I could go for the bachelor's degree that I wanted. At 31, I moved across the state to take a job in a city where the university is that I wanted to attend. And now here I am at 32, and I've just completed my first semester at the university that I wanted to attend. I am currently working towards two career goals. One, because I want to have a plan B, and two, because I love learning new things. So having an excuse to learn those new things is always a plus. I've never thought about suicide since my sophomore year of high school, and I can genuinely say that I am happy with where I am. Now, granted, I say all these things to show that, again, that those dark moments aren't the end-all be-all, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and that tomorrow brings new hope. But that being said, that doesn't mean that I still don't struggle. No matter who you are in this life, whether you deal with depression or not, you're going to have mountains and valleys in your life. You're going to have ups and downs, and it's going to be difficult sometimes. But again, those difficult situations aren't always going to last. There's always hope. And granted, I still struggle with some of the side effects of my depression, especially if I don't take my antidepressants regularly. Like the brain fog does come back, but psychologically, one of the things that I'm still struggling with is not wearing the mask that I'm so used to wearing. Old habits are hard to get rid of, and when I am tremendously upset, I default to that mask, burying my true emotions behind a smile. But thankfully, I know with time that mask is slowly going away, because I'm becoming more comfortable with opening up to people about what I'm struggling with. And I have closer relationships with people now where I feel comfortable in those spaces to open up about those things. It does take time. It does take finding that person who you feel comfortable with to do that. But there is a way to do it, and I encourage you all who are struggling with this to seek that. I also know that when you're going through this and you're trying to get out of it, that you have to be patient with yourself. This isn't a instant fix. It's dealing with mental health issues is like dealing with a broken bone. That broken bone is not going to heal overnight. It takes time to recover. And in some situations, healing that broken bone doesn't always fix the issue. You also have to take physical therapy to recover fully, which takes longer. And I know that can be overwhelming for some, but again, it's for the good. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to share with others what you're struggling with. It's okay not to be okay and to not be perfect. It's okay not to have everything together. And when you share, or when you finally reach out to somebody you trust, just remember that you're not going to be a burden to that person. Because the thing is, going back to the broken bone, let's say it's a broken leg, you can't fix that on your own. You need it bandaged, you need it splinted, and you need help getting things done that you could do on your own if you had both legs working. When you reach out to somebody for that help, they may get blood on themselves as they worry over you, but your broken bone isn't going to cause them to break their leg. So it's okay to ask for that help and allow them to help you. And if you don't feel like there's anybody that you can trust enough to talk about these things comfortably, there are programs out there and hotlines to reach out to with people who are prepared to help you through these situations. They have the bandages, they have the splints, and they're willing to help. So I encourage you, if you are struggling with this or you know somebody who is, to reach out and seek help. Be brave. I know you can do it.